Well, this is fancy.
The chairs.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Facility Managers Technology Roadmap panel discussion. And happy Friday. If you're here right now, congratulations.
You made it.
You made it. The last day of InfoComm. So we're super happy that you're here. Before we actually get into introducing the panel, I'm actually going to have Simon kick us off with a couple slides.
Crystal's generously pinch hitting for a friend of ours who couldn't make it. He'll probably be the only person watching this on YouTube, or at least he better be. He was going to start off and just really talk about a couple of the industry organizations that we're part of and that we represent. Those being the IFMA IT community. Anybody familiar with IFMA? All right, great, a few hands up there. So International Facility Managers Association. The IT community specifically in conjunction with another entity, BETA, the Built Environment Technology Alliance, is really focusing on how do we help to develop, build, support, roll out technology to help support the corporate real estate and the FM communities. And there's a lot of great content there. Certainly if you're not familiar with IFMA, check it out. We're always looking for new members of the IT community. Next slide, Cheryl, please. There is a book that we developed a few years back, really focusing on the very specifics of the information technology world, specific to facility managers. The second edition is available, and I believe there is a newer edition coming out soon enough. It really is a great guide for people to understand every aspect of technology and how it can impact the facilities world. I think one of the things we'll cover and that we're seeing is certainly the impact and just the different technologies that are needed and being supported in a post-pandemic environment, really mean that the skill sets are changing dramatically for traditional facility managers.
And we actually I'm here to drop a little teaser for the Facility Manager's Guide to Audiovisual Technology, and that will be coming out fall this year, so stay tuned.
So I would just like to have each of you take a couple minutes to introduce yourself, tell the audience what company you're with and what you do. So Colette, can we start with you?
Sure. So I'm Colette Temmink. I'm a co-founder of a company called Skyre. We are an FM advisory and ESG firm, so we help companies with their facilities management and ESG. And I also co-chair IFMA ITC community along with BETA. So really excited to be here today.
Thanks, Colette. Simon Davis, I'm founder of a company called Purposeful Intent. The company itself is really geared towards helping companies understand and develop their roadmap for the future of work. So as we come back to whatever's next for organizations, we help companies really develop the right type of strategy for if, when, why, how people should come back into the office. We support that by developing a community environment of end users to talk about what they're doing. So large companies talking about how they're addressing the future of work. And again, we'll talk about some of those components today. I'm also on the IT community of IFMA, help with arranging events and ensuring that we have great content. So,
which you do.
Thank you.
My name is Cassie Wells. I am the corporate sales manager at CCS Presentation Systems. We're a national audiovisual integrator, and I have been with them and in the industry for 10 years. And I also have the pleasure of working with Crystal, so yeah.
So I am Crystal Pierce. I am the Director of Business Development at CCS. I have been with them for 3.5 years now, and I'm actually a former school teacher. So I'm still pretty new to the industry and loving it. So we're just going to dive right in. Colette, I'm going to kick things off with you. How are companies thinking and planning for space in today's environment?
So just skip two more charts and we'll get right there. So companies are thinking of space in two different ways. One is the physical space, which is now being broadened to include many different locations, right? Home, you have hotels, you have, I'm sure some of you are working even from here. So it is very mobile. So companies are thinking about how do they serve employees in different locations. So it's about the services that companies are providing. So how do you connect individuals in an asynchronous and a synchronous way, right? The way that they work. Do they work alone, or do they have to collaborate with their teams? And if they have to collaborate, then it really falls within AV and technology, and how do you make that happen? But then how do you also draw people back into the office, right? There's been many surveys. I think PwC did one, and they said 58% or a little over 50% of the people actually wanted to work a few days a week from home. Compare that to plus 60% of employers saying, you know, we would rather have you in the office. And then I think CNBC came out with a study that said 50% of companies want employees back in the office. So there's a disconnect between people and how they want to work and the physical environment and the office environment, and how do you draw people back to the office environment to collaborate with their peers. And so thinking about that space, and how do you do that when you've got maybe a suburban office and they really want to be in more of a hub and spoke model, which is more of a suburban office. And so I think companies are really rethinking their footprint and rethinking the services, and then rethinking the infrastructure that supports that physical environment. And that's really around AV and technology and concierge services.
I think we go back to couple.
Okay,
One. Yeah.
here we go. Yes. So Simon, in
One more.
adding on to that, how is technology supporting the change in the space?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of macro topics that I want to talk about briefly, which really all sort of play into the current environment. Seeing a consolidation of technology, and we're seeing organizations that I believe that are going to really impact the market from a work perspective that may not have played in that space before. When I think of companies like Salesforce and Google and Microsoft, companies that have just a tremendous amount of data about the intricacies of how we work, how we relate, who's connected to whom, how often do we meet. We look at a Slack channel and understand how long a conversation is going. I think there are companies that are really going to push the envelope in terms of the future of work, and obviously impacting all of us in terms of when, why, how we use space. So that consolidation, I think, is going to happen, and it's going to be an attractive market for companies that traditionally haven't played in that space. The biggest drive, I think, for everything, to Colette's point, is really the changing mindset. Yes, CEOs and the Elon Musks of the world may say, "Thou shalt come back to the office." Most people don't want to. At least they don't want to come in 5 days a week. So I think the power dynamic has changed. That employees are now really more focused on, being able to build a schedule around what their life contains and the type of work they're trying to do. I don't know many people now, and I was chatting with some friends in New York a couple of weeks ago, that would commute in to do an 8 o'clock call that was a conference call, right? Most people aren't doing those things in the office anymore. They're going to do it from home. And I think people are really looking at how technology can enable them to have a smoother work-life balance. And I think that's really going to impact organizations that are trying to support and attract the right talent. We're definitely seeing more and more solutions in the market. It's amazing for me, like we work in a relatively small space of corporate real estate and IT and FM. The conferences that we go to would probably be half of this one building. So when you think of wandering around aimlessly hours in the north building and then here, right, just the amount of technology that is helping people with these changes, I think is going to be incredibly impactful. And I think we're also seeing a growing ecosystem of products. So we're seeing products that before may have been aimed at one distinct market. So let's say technology aimed at landlords and aimed at supporting tenants, that now has an equal applicability to a corporate occupier. And especially when you think of things like conferencing technology and technologies that help you work better and help you work in a more remote and also in a more asynchronous way. And then I think finally, from a technology standpoint, we've certainly seen in our space a lot of tactical solutions. And what I mean by that is things that we're addressing specific problems. The most prominent, I would say, being technologies around booking a desk and tracking social distancing, right? Those things are forefront still of people's minds about how relevant are they going forwards. I'm seeing people invest a lot of money in technology in the sensor space, as an example, that I don't necessarily believe they're going to need in a year and a half, 2 years' time. But there's a real push for understanding how many people are coming back, when are people coming in, and that's really, I think, pushing sort of the mindset of change and people investing in technology to help support and understand the new dynamics of work as we go forwards.
Cassie, to you. How can companies build a working environment to keep and attract good employees?
So Simon already touched on this, but people want both human connection and flexibility to work from home. And when you're thinking about which employees those are, the first thing you do is identify those. Who do we want to work for us? How do we attract those types of individuals with their own preferences? Because quite frankly, employees will leave to get more flexibility. They will leave if they're working from home and need to see people. That is, we've seen tons of movement lately based around hybrid models. And just like Simon said, I mean, if you have a conference call, you can expect at least 1 or 2 people to show up from home, video on, video off. It's totally flexible in today's world, and that's not going away. So the first step, identify who you want to participate and your clients. If they're planning their space, who do they want to show up? Who do they want to keep? Who are they investing in? And then you build a working environment around keeping them. So up here, you'll see different categories for profile mixes. Some are in-office heavy, in-office medium, in-office light, and remote heavy. So one thing I would suggest that your clients do when planning a space, and especially if they're coming to you as an audiovisual integrator and they need assistance in planning, first identify which one of these categories the company relies, where they are. Because without knowing that, you can't plan a space. You could have the same exact square footage, the building could be exactly the same floor, but you're gonna build it differently depending on these models. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Adding on to that, how are companies planning for more collaborative and inclusive space?
So Simon touched on a couple of these. One thing that we've seen recently are occupancy sensors. So the importance of the occupancy sensors, let's say a company builds meeting spaces with 3 large conference rooms and 2 small huddle rooms. With the occupancy sensor readings, they can tell you that, let's say conference room A is used 95% of the time, but they only have 3 users. Let's say conference room B doesn't get used at all, and conference room C has a monthly board meeting. With that data, you can then analyze for your new space, hey, we only really need 1 large conference room, but because we're having so many meetings with 3 or less users, why don't we transform those into huddle spaces? Which of course you have different technology for large conference rooms than you would huddle spaces, right? So it affects the speakers, the microphones, the cameras. So that's one way. We've also seen a lot of open office. So with open office, it comes a whole new environment for requiring sound masking. 10 years ago, a lot of people were in offices or sharing offices, and you don't really see that anymore. Especially with certain groups in open office, it can get really loud. So, you take a sales group like mine and you put them in an open office, you have to have sound masking because we are all loud. So it definitely changes who is going where, certainly changes the technology in making it the most optimal. There's also remote monitoring. So IT directors are now able to remotely monitor and troubleshoot from their house. They don't have to be there to set up a meeting like they used to. They can receive proactive emails saying, hey, this display is down. Someone needs to go check that before the 12 o'clock meeting. So that's something that's different than it always has been. And then, of course, Simon touched on this as well, but the hoteling. Do people have permanent desks? Is that their own space, or are they checking in? Do they need scheduling panels for their rooms? This hybrid environment has changed quite a bit. So my biggest suggestion is, when planning for your space, definitely engage with your audiovisual designers as soon as possible, because they can help guide you through the best scenario for your space. So.
I don't think that's the right slide. Simon, how do companies pivot from a pre-pandemic environment to meet the present-day hybrid requirements?
Yeah, I think, regardless of the technology that you're offering, deploying, supporting, looking for, these steps are equally valid. Whether it's an FM technology, specifically like a booking tool, whether it's something like a sensor technology that Cassie related to, whether it's AV technology. I think, as people are starting to transition back to an office-based environment, one of the first things that you need to look at is the maturity of the technology that you currently have in play, right? Does what you're trying to use now and the goals you're trying to achieve, can they be met with the existing technology? I'm seeing in our space a lot of inaccuracies and inconsistencies. You look at things like booking tools is a good example, right? And pre-pandemic, a lot of people didn't have those type of technologies in play. So post-pandemic, you really need to see, is it creating the right behaviors? I know myself, I had a period of time, I live in Arizona, and I had about a month where I was having some work done. I always work from home anyway, but I decided to use a free service that was being provided by WeWork. And I booked a desk every single day. I think I went in twice in a month, right? So one of the things you look at from the maturity perspective is, does the technology meet the business process or the behavior you're trying to achieve? From my perspective, if somebody looks at the data, they'll be like, wow, Simon is using this space every day, he needs more space. The reality was, Simon is booking a space every day because he knows that if I don't, then on the off chance that I want to use it, it's not available, right? So you need to look at sort of the capability of the technology to deliver the behaviors you're trying to afford. Cassie mentioned the point earlier about the design aspects of sensors, and I think they're critical, right? Understanding and using space better. If you want to attract people back into the office and they come in and they have a bad experience, then you're going to do nothing but put them off. The example I always use is actually, if you think of an environment where, let's say I spend 2 or 3 hours a day on calls that need to be in a private environment. Well, if we have purpose-built phone booths or singular offices in our building, and it's a hybrid environment where anybody can use them, and every time I come in they're used, I'm not going to come into the office anymore. So technology can help you actually understand that utilization as well. And again, the behavior is supported by that, right? You're not putting in individualized phone booths with the intent that somebody's going to sit in there for 8 hours a day. They're supposed to be quick and easy to use for specific purposes. So that's sort of the maturity assessment side, looking at what you have versus what you're trying to achieve. The opportunity analysis is then looking and saying, well, are there capabilities in those technologies and tools that maybe in the past we haven't used, right? Maybe we've invested in some really high-end technology for a conference room that actually does support hybrid and asynchronous work, and we've just never used it. So looking at where those opportunities exist, and then from there developing a gap analysis. So to truly say, okay, based on the behavior we're trying to achieve, based on the technology we have, what is the gap, right? Where is there an area that we need to plug in and fill in? I think you also then need to look at, as you're coming back, what other pain points are there that exist. What information might we need? What reports might we need? How have things changed? And what can we identify as being pains that need to be addressed? I think then also looking at both availability and obviously the cost proposition of technologies. I love the proto boxes over there. I don't know if corporate real estate execs would invest in tons of those, to make the experience better of being able to interact with their employees. They might be very happy with a Zoom. gentleman on the panel before us talked about virtual reality headsets. I've got one at home. I would never use that on more than a fun basis, just because they're clunky, they're annoying, and they don't give enough of a value, right? So you have to think about that, I think, as well. And then I think the other point that we need to think about from a roadmap perspective is the vision of what are you trying to achieve, and also the vision of what is the business trying to do, right? If Elon Musk has his view that everybody has to work in the office at least 40 hours a week, his space is going to be very, very different and need to be very different than somebody who's going with, let's say, more of a hybrid model. He's in reality probably going to need more space, because those people that have to come in and work in a desk are still going to need collaborative space. Whereas a company that's going with a more of a hybrid approach, can actually likely reduce their real estate, reduce their spend, and in the same vein, increase the investment in the core assets that will bring people in. Having quality AV, quality experiences, being able to walk into a room and have everything set up is going to entice people back. And similarly, not having those things is going to discourage people from coming in. So, I think there are areas that really need to be focused on as we come back.
Simon, I just read a study the other day. Avacor did a study that the average time it takes for a meeting room meeting to start is currently 12 minutes.
Right.
And 10 years ago, I don't have the studies from 10 years ago, but I would guarantee that was about 20.
Yeah.
And so I know it's along the lines of exactly what you're saying. When we meet with clients, we say, what's most important to you? 90% of the time, they are telling us ease of use. How do we make it easier? How do we get it so a facility manager or an IT manager does not have to set up the meeting room, right?
Yeah,
and that's going to help attract people. They don't want to come in and wait for someone to set up their meeting. They want to come in and go, right?
Yeah, definitely seamless experience, and they want a consistent experience. Mm-hmm. If I'm in the office in Singapore, I need it to function the same way as if I'm in the office in London or New York, right? I don't want to have completely different tech, because as you say, you're potentially taking 25% of a meeting time just getting everything set up and ready, and then starting the actual substance of what you're trying to do. So.
They want consistency.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say, offices, they're designed to be an enabler for people to be productive. And the tools that you use, technology, one of the biggest challenges in a survey that we had done amongst managers was the connectivity. So people want to work from home, but the connectivity in many cases doesn't support Zoom meetings, right? We've all kind of lived through the glitches and the freezes. But you have that also in an office environment, and technology also is an enabler for employees. So where they work, technology enables them. They could either work in a specific environment like home, or they can work in an office, or they can work somewhere else. Having them all come back into one place is more about collaboration. So should the floor plate change to really add more collaborative space? And I think that's where companies are really struggling with a bit. Even though they may recognize where people want to work and how often they want to work, managers are still going to bring teams together. And what days are they going to do that? And the planning, the space planning around that has changed dynamically for companies. And they really need technology to help them solve for that.
Colette, can you share with us what are some of the facility management trends driving the need for technology, and what are the biggest challenges in the implementations?
Yeah. So we tend to look at trends as obviously a leading indicator. And there are things that are happening within facilities, certainly within the last 2 years, that has changed things dramatically. We see trends in technology, in enablement. So how are people using technology, both from the standpoint of getting product done, but also enabling them to book space. And so the hybrid work is not new. I mean, we've been doing this for decades. It's just we had probably one of the largest pilots in history where all companies did it collectively together. So when companies say we couldn't do it when they were doing it 10 years ago, in fact, you could, and now technology is enabling that even more. But we're also seeing the occupant experience that comes along with that. It's employees. What kind of experience do they want? I think one of the big factors for organizations are, what is going to happen to their culture when they're allowing for different work environments, and how do they have a cohesive culture and bringing that together? And that's going to happen through services. It's going to happen through the environment and branding and management and leadership. right? Really working with their employees on what that culture is. But then there's also ESG, right? Being sustainable, being a good steward of the environment, and being focused on the energy use. And as we add more conference rooms, we're going to add more energy use, right? Especially around AV, and how do we do that in a really thoughtful manner. And then I would say digital transformation. Companies are trying to get smarter about the data that they have. Can they get to predictive analytics? Can they use AI, business intelligence, and can they take some of that information from sensors and glean insights and anomalies? And I think you're going to see certainly more data scientists coming out of college that are going to get picked up pretty quick, but this is really an area that's growing, certainly in facilities management. When you look at HR and facilities, those tend to be, at times, the top 2 expenses for companies, especially in technology. So having the insights around that to manage that and provide a space that employees are comfortable and productive in is going to be important.
Simon, what are some of the initial steps that teams can take to develop a technology roadmap?
Well, I mean, I think it really is. It's trying to understand sort of those business justifications, business needs, as we discussed earlier, and really, focusing your efforts on those things that matter most. One thing I would say as well is people need to start thinking about the future. I wish I had a chance to speak to the gentleman that was on the panel before, because he made an interesting point in talking sort of about metaverse and virtual reality, that he felt it was probably 10 years away. That surprised me, because a lot of people that I'm hearing from are talking, a lot more sort of, a 5-year path. But I think from a corporation perspective, regardless of what you do, if you have an office-based environment, you've got to think, I think, for the future about the next generation. That are going to be a lot more conscious about things like sustainability. They aren't necessarily going to want to have to travel in the way that, when I lived in the UK for a while, I was traveling 2 hours each way into London. Right, I have a 5-year-old at home. I know at some point in my life she's going to be like, "Hey, Dad, why did you get into your car, drive to a box to do what you could have done at home, all the while wearing a little tie and a suit on the way?" Right? Because I think life is changing, and I think people have to think about that from an employee perspective as they do plan technology for the future. I think the adoption on the metaverse side, outside of it being sort of a way to collaborate remotely, is really going to be driven by people, companies, and certainly younger generation from an ESG perspective. I struggle to think that in 5 years and certainly in 10 years that you will have an environment like this where people will fly from all over the world to attend an event. And again, I think more from the ESG side than from anything else, right? Just a different mindset of younger generation not wanting to sort of damage the planet the way that we have in the past.
Yeah, I think connecting individuals together through technology, and who better to do it than the folks here at Infocom, really. So you're going to be enabling really the future work in what you do. How do you provide that synchronistic environment that is inclusive to employees when they're working with teams, no matter where they're working across the globe? Because having that diversity of thought and bringing more people in that aren't just in one physical location should add more value to an organization in the long run.
Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate your expertise. I'm not seeing any audience questions, so I'm guessing maybe you're just tired. This is Friday. But before we end, I just want to ask from the three of you if you have any final words of wisdom, parting advice.
My suggestions, and I already mentioned this and I'll touch on it again, engage your audiovisual designers early in your process. When you decide we might move, that's soon enough, reach out. And my second piece of advice is when you're doing that, poll your employees. Ask them what type of environment do you need to thrive in your position and to get your work done as easily as possible and efficiently as possible. So ask them about their day-to-day. Ask them what would make their life easier. People want to have a say in their working environment. Give them that say.
Yeah, but I think that there needs to be a renewed focus on what you're actually trying to achieve for every corporation. Anytime I speak to somebody about the future of work and they talk about, oh yeah, we're a 3-day-a-week company, even to me, that is the wrong answer to the question, because you really should be enabling people to do the work they do best at the time they need to do that, right? And to establish, technology to help you work in a collaborative way, technology to help you work asynchronously, as well as having phenomenal technology to help you collaborate when you're actually physically in the space. So being able to actually plan and understand the needs of varying teams, groups, departments, and companies to optimize every aspect of the technology experience, the work experience, your capability to collaborate, your real estate costs, your ESG impacts, right? And I think people need to be a lot more deliberate in their thinking on that, as opposed to just saying, yeah, we're going hybrid, you're coming in 3 days a week, because I think we all know what's going to happen in that environment is that people are not going to come in on Monday and Friday. And my view is that I think there's a lot of talk right now about the Great Resignation. I don't think we've even seen that. I think what we're seeing right now is people realigning where they want to be with their own expectations. I think in 2 years' time, when some of the large companies that never touched on hybrid ways of working suddenly look at the bottom line and say, you know what, this hybrid thing didn't work, we haven't saved any money. When they start asking people to come back to the office 5 days a week who've had flexibility, even if it's a 3 day a week, that's when you'll see people quit. I personally believe the reason that Tesla made this announcement that you have to be back in the office is they want to get rid of a decent proportion of their staff, but they don't want it to be directed from them. That's my view on it, for sure. So.
Yeah, I would say we've been talking a long time about having HR, IT, and facilities at the table. I just think the jobs are going to change in the future. I think companies are going to have to think about how they're providing that connectivity of employees, right? So are they going to have, now it's going to be AV or immersed technologies, and that's really going to be a new function, a new department within an organization that stands toe-to-toe with HR and IT. I think orgs need to change. They've had chief sustainability officer, maybe it's time for a chief AV officer, immersed technology officer to enable that, work and culture and experience and all of those things coming together really happens with what we're seeing today. I mean, even with some of the amazing technologies at this event. So look forward to the changes. Exciting future.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, panelists. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us. We appreciate you and we appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Crystal.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Crystal.
moderating.
Have a great rest of your day.